Auburn will have a very similar schedule in 25 to the one they had in 2024. Obviously, the home and away games are flipped in the SEC, and they don't have Cal this year, but they have Baylor, and they will play on the road in their non-conference game. So I think that does make this a little bit of a tougher schedule. Let's break it down. Here is that full schedule. And that game, that Baylor game, got moved to Friday night. This was just not long ago. They announced that game's going to be on Friday night. So that possibly makes that an even tougher game. I know it's kind of tough to go on the road on those Thursday, Friday night games. But it's week one, so maybe it's not really that big of a deal. But yeah, you look at the non-conference, they'll play Baylor on the road. They'll play Ball State, South Alabama, and Mercer. So not too tough of a non-conference schedule outside of Baylor. South Alabama, sometimes, they've had some decent teams, but Auburn should roll in those three games. Baylor is going to be the challenge for this team in the non-conference. You look at the home and away games. At home this year in the SEC, they'll have Georgia, Missouri, Kentucky, and Alabama. And then on the road, they'll play Oklahoma, Texas A&M, Arkansas, and Vanderbilt. And when Auburn has had really good seasons in the past, it's been when they've had Georgia and Alabama at home, when they've been able to pull off those big wins. That helps. But let's say they do beat Georgia and they do beat Alabama, which would be huge. You've still got to go on the road and play Oklahoma, Texas A&M, Arkansas, and even a Vanderbilt team that is probably going to be tough for them. They just beat them last year. So this is a pretty tough schedule. It's not the worst in the SEC, and we'll show you how it stacks up here in just a second. But let's go week by week. Again, that Baylor game on Friday night, that's going to be a tough one. I think Baylor probably going to be a slight favorite in that game. Baylor is a team that a lot of people have as a preseason top 25 team on their way to early top 25. So, yeah, that one could be a very tough game. Then you've got Ball State the next week and then South Alabama. So, a couple of easier games in the non-conference. And then it's back-to-back road games to open up SEC play. Very, very tough games here. On the road at Oklahoma, on the road at Texas A&M. Of course, that Texas A&M game will be a revenge game after that overtime game last year. So that one will be really tough. Oklahoma, I think, is going to be a little bit better this year. And Oklahoma beat Auburn last year. This time it's on the road. So those are going to be two challenging games. You look at those first 5 games, they've got 3 road games that they could lose. And if they lose all 3 of them, they're 2-3. And here we go again. But if they can find a way to win 2 of those 3 road games, then I think the rest of the season, the rest of the schedule sets up in a way that makes Auburn a real threat, maybe even a playoff contender. But it all starts in those first 5 games. You got to at least go 4-1 in those first 5 games. They get a bye week after Texas A&M, and then it's back-to-back home games. So they get Georgia at home on October 11th, and then Missouri on October 18th. So tough games, but they're home, and they get Georgia after that bye week. That'll give them a chance, maybe. Georgia's not the same Georgia that they were a couple of years ago. They're still a great program, really, really good at the top of the conference, but they're just not quite that dominant team that we saw a couple of years ago. So maybe Auburn finds a way to pull off a win in that game. And if they can get to, win those 2 games and they're sitting there with just 1 loss, you look at the rest of the schedule, it's not that bad. Arkansas on the road October 25th. That'll be a tricky game. Then they've got Kentucky at home November 1st and Vanderbilt on the road November 8th. Those 3, from Missouri to Vanderbilt, we're talking about 4 games that really could go either way. 4 games that Auburn could win, but also 4 games that they can lose. So that's going to be a really important stretch for them to get, potentially all 4 of those games. If they are going to be, a potential playoff contender or something like that, they'll have to win all 4 of those games. Then they get that other bye week before Mercer. Not a great time for the bye week. You'd rather have it maybe before that Vanderbilt game or something. But, before Mercer, I guess it does give them a lot of time to prepare for Alabama because they get a bye week and then they get Mercer. So that's the positive there. But not ideal, not an ideal spot for that second bye week. Again, toughest part of the schedule is probably going to be Oklahoma and Texas A&M back-to-back. Outside of that, there are no real tough stretches. Of course, from Georgia to Vanderbilt with no bye weeks, 5 straight SEC games, that's going to be tough. But there are no brutal stretches on this schedule compared to some of the other teams in the SEC. So how do they compare? Well, if you look at their conference opponents, you look at their records from last year, Auburn's SEC opponents went 30-34 last season, so a 47% win percentage. That's near the bottom. That's one of the easier schedules. Really, I guess it's more in the middle, close to 50%, but still on the easier side. So Auburn, again, I think it all starts with those first 5 games, 3 big road games. They've got to find some way to get to maybe 4-1 in those first 5 games, and then the rest of the schedule sets up to where, who knows, maybe Auburn could be in that playoff conversation in 2025.